It's the BBP TV show since 2012, where amazing guests share their digital adventures. Who will we meet today? Small biz influencer, up-and-coming trendsetter, accomplished author? You never know who'll be dropping by. And now, here's your host, Elaine Lindsay, the bionic glamourpreneur with Truel Social Media, who's the second most curious person on the planet.
Hello. It's wonderful to be back. Hello, Ore. How are you?
Hello. I am good, Elaine.
I am so thrilled and honored to have you here with me today. My guest today is Ore Ogungbayi, and she's coming to us from Greenwich in London. And I'm going to take a few minutes and give you a little bit about Ore. She helps young people to thrive and excel by supporting their development in confidence, communication, and mental well-being. And I have to tell you, she's had an incredibly interesting story. I'm not going to tell you anything about the story because I want you to enjoy it for yourselves. I will, however, tell you she attended college and went on to study economics at the University of Central England in Birmingham, and she served as a missionary for a year and a half. She is, in fact, widowed, and she's the mother of two beautiful daughters. And even though she, like many mothers, finds it a challenging role, she believes the rewards far outweigh the hard work required to help these young women reach their full potential and become a credit to society. I just think that's absolutely lovely. What a great way to put it. Thank you for agreeing to come on the show with me.
I am so pleased to be here.
We have so much to talk about because your story is kind of long, winding, and there's a lot of mileage involved. And for everybody that's listening, we're going to talk about Ore's upcoming book. Ore's going to be releasing her book, I have here, on May the 3rd, courtesy of Amazon. And as usual, we will have all of that and all of her social links on the website on her page. So let's sort of dive in and start with where you started. How about that?
I can remember back to when I was 2 years old, so I've got a really good memory. But my life started at 3 months old, according to the story that I've been told. And at 3 months old, my African parents who'd come to England to study had to have me fostered. And so for almost 7 years, I lived with a different family. Yeah. And that's where my life started.
Absolutely. And I believe that was in Kent.
It was in Kent in England, and my father was a Scottish gentleman and his wife was an English lady. So I was a very cute brown child with two white lovely parents.
Well, see, I think that's a lovely mix.
I agree.
So those first 7 years must have been like everybody in Britain, lots of rain, lots of greenery, lots of roses, and just getting to be an English child, if you will.
Yes, it's grey.
Yeah. It's a terrible thing to say, it's grey, but that's really what I remember of England. Scotland too. Chilly, damp, grey. Love it. My favorite place on this planet, but that's what the weather is. I think it's in my head because today it's just like that here as well.
Oh.
So 7 years go by, perhaps, just regular events. And then what happened?
Just before I turned 7 years old, so 2 months before I turned 7 years old, I was kidnapped.
Yes.
So people tend to stop when I say that.
Absolutely. That's not what you expect to hear about a 7-year-old.
No, especially not at a Christmas party, which is where I was taken from.
Oh my God. Oh.
Yes.
Oh, well, then do give us a bit more, because this is where the mileage comes in.
Okay, yes, I'd love to tell you what I can recall of the actual event. So I was 2 months away from 7 years old, and Christmas is my favorite time of year.
Me
I
too.
prefer it to my birthday. I love Santa. He's a good guy and he always delivers. And as a 6-year-old child, I was very excited about Christmas. And my mother, my English mother, had taken me to an event, a Christmas event in London. And I was not familiar with London because I had been raised in Kent, but I was very, very excited to go. So during the course of the event, a lady came up to me just to just to have a conversation because I was bored. There were only a couple of children there. It was boring. And so she came over and had a little chat with me, asked how I was doing, what I wanted for Christmas. And I told her I wanted a rocking horse. And then she said to me, she said, funnily enough, I've actually got you something and it's downstairs. Would you like to come and have a look? Now, my mother had taught me never to go anywhere with strangers or never to go anywhere without permission. Now, this lady was not a stranger. I knew her, but I also knew that I needed permission from my mother. But my mother was not in the vicinity at that point. I think maybe she'd popped to the ladies. So I asked this lady, I said, have you asked my mother for permission? And she said yes. And so I went with her.
Right.
On getting downstairs, I was looking for a van or some kind of delivery lorry, and there wasn't any in sight. So she said, well, the lorry's around the corner because it's too, this space here is too small to park it. And I thought that sounds feasible to me. So she said, if you get into this car, we'll just drive around. I will go pick up, this rocking horse that I've actually got for you. So I got into the car and off we went. And that was the moment that I was taken.
Wow. That had to be terrifying.
When I was taken at that point, I just assumed we were going to get my Christmas presents.
Yeah.
So I wasn't terrified at that point. I became terrified 2 weeks later, which is strange.
Yeah.
Yes. Because what had happened was she then told me in the car that actually I just wanted to keep this a surprise. Your mother and I have decided to take you to Barbados for Christmas to watch a Michael Jackson concert, and you need to have your passport done, and we can only have that done in London. So your mother said it's okay for you to stay with me for a few days while we get everything in order, and then she'll meet us at the airport. So I went along with this woman willingly now because I thought, oh, I'm going to Barbados. I'd seen pictures. I was so excited. And so I went with her on the promise of a Christmas present.
Right. And let me just back you up for a second, because you said she was familiar to you.
Yeah.
Was it someone that your mom knew? Someone you had interacted with before, obviously.
Yes. She'd come round and visit. She'd come round to our home. She spent a number of Christmases there. I mean, 2 weeks later, I was to find out who she actually was anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you when you ask me.
Yes. So now you're at this other place. You're waiting. I don't think there's a rocking horse.
There isn't.
No. And how close are we to Christmas now?
I know that we got to, because I was taken out of the country.
Yeah.
And my understanding is, based on the account that I now have, is that we arrived in this new destination on the 1st of January, 1973.
Okay.
So it must have been a couple of weeks, because this incident occurred a couple of weeks before Christmas, as far as my memory can serve me.
Yeah.
So I think we must have been on the run for about 2 weeks plus, because the person who took me was on the run now, because the police had been alerted.
Absolutely. Oh, your parents must have been beside themselves.
Yes, they were. I was reunited with them when I was 20. Wow. And I got to hear what had happened after the event.
Yeah.
But then I also got to hear the story of my abductor as well.
Of course. And time flows differently when you're 6.
Yes.
And our brains will construct stories around what we're given in order to make us feel safe.
Yes.
And that to to me made sense that you were with them for a couple of weeks before it became a concern for you.
Yes. I wasn't happy to be separated from my foster mother because I'd never left home before. I'd never been to a sleepover. My foster mother and father loved me, and I was
Mhm.
just such a happy child. And I didn't feel comfortable being with somebody else, but I was reassured that my mother said it was okay. I really did want to go to Barbados and I wanted to go
Yeah,
to a Michael Jackson concert, so I was prepared to make the sacrifice.
absolutely. Oh, well, those are all things that would entice a child. Absolutely.
Yes.
So, in fact, where did you go off to?
Lagos in Nigeria in West Africa.
So, definitely not a Michael Jackson concert.
No, I kept on asking because when we arrived in Lagos, I thought we were in Barbados. I
Yes.
didn't have a clue because it was sunny, it wasn't grey, it was
Yeah.
sunny, there were palm trees, there was hustling and bustling, there were a lot of black people around, and it just looked like the pictures.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just assumed we were in Barbados. The only difference was my mother wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are your recollections for the next little while, and how did you come to reconcile the fact that your mom wasn't there?
Oh gosh, I recall it quite vividly actually. I remember wondering where my mother was, why she wasn't at the airport. And I was told that she will be arriving in a couple of days because she'd flown from a different airport to ours, which again seemed to make sense.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I've waited this long, a couple of more days, it'll be fine. 2 days later, my mother hadn't arrived, and I kept on asking. It, 2 days later, I'd concluded that I didn't want this present anymore. I just wanted my mummy. That's where I was
Yeah,
now as a 6-year-old.
of
I just
course.
thought, I actually don't want to see the Michael Jackson concert anymore. I don't want to be in the Barbados. I just want my mummy. So I had what you would call a little tantrum,
Yeah.
and it didn't go down well
Oh,
because we're in Africa and they're not used to that kind of behavior.
mm-mm.
So I got yelled at and shouted down. And when I wouldn't stop, they said, "Could you please sit down? That woman is not your mother. This woman here is your mother." And that's when I was knocked for six.
Oh my
Hence,
God.
hence the
Yes,
name of my book.
absolutely. Knocked for six, I think really makes sense. And that had to be, in a way, such a culture shock, being brought up, probably not getting yelled at, not being told off, and not having had to have that kind of a tantrum, finding yourself completely out of anything that was familiar.
I cannot even put into words how I felt and where I was in my head. The person who'd taken me, who was my birth mother, was lovely. I later came to discover years later that she did it out of desperation.
Yeah.
The people who were yelling at me, I didn't even know them.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't even know that they were family, or I don't know who they were. And I remember, number one, I couldn't speak the language. I
right.
wasn't familiar with the food.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know where I was. I had been separated from my puppy, from my
Oh,
school. And when I was 6 years old, I'd got myself a boyfriend. So
oh,
I lost him as well. I'd lost
oh
him
no.
as well. I'd lost everything.
Your first love. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, how
So
sad. That's just the top of the oh no.
it was tragic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. I
So,
laugh now. But,
and that's something I think is wonderful, because it's your spirit and how you've evolved from what you went through. Because what I'd like you to share is the fact that this was not a short term.
no, there was a lot of fallout from this one incident.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I finally finished writing my book, because I asked my mother, my birth mother, to contribute one of the chapters, I wanted to hear her version.
Yeah.
because I only knew the story from the perspective of a 6-year-old, and I resented her. I resented her because I felt that she had taken everything from me and thrown
Yeah.
me into a new world where I was looking from the outside in, and I suffered a lot of rejection and I was dejected. Children are resilient,
Yeah.
and when I was told that she was my mother, I wouldn't accept it. I just couldn't understand how that would be the case. And they tried to justify that by showing me the color of her skin and saying, well, look at the color of her skin and look at yours. How could you think she could be your mother? But I didn't see the logic behind the argument. I
Yeah.
just didn't understand what the logic was. I didn't understand how babies were made. I just understood that if you wanted a baby, you went out and got one. And if my white parents wanted a brown baby, so that was their choice. I wanted
Yeah.
a black dog, so I had a black dog, you know. so so that had no logic in it. And I was scared because what I think they were telling me was I was never going to see my mummy again.
Oh,
That's what I was hearing. And it frightened me. But as a 6-year-old, I was resilient. So I thought, okay, my mummy's going to come and get me. I know that she is. So I'm just going to go out and play and make
yeah.
new friends. And that's when my real problems began because I don't know if it was my accent, I don't know what it was, but the difference stood out and the name calling started, roly poly, elephant, because I was a chubby little girl, but I hadn't realized it up to that point. And so the
Yeah.
name calling started. And that's when things started to go really downhill for me. I
Oh,
went through a lot.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they almost destroyed who I was. By the time I was 14, I hated myself. I wanted to be anybody else but me. I self-loathed. I, and I blamed my abductor for this. I thought
Of
if you'd have
course.
just left me where I was. I realized she was my mother because I was now 14. I wasn't stupid. And I
Yeah.
understood how you got babies. And she told me her story, even though I wasn't listening. But I really resented the fact that I had been brought to a place where people treated me like the ugly duckling.
Yeah. Yeah. And those first 6 years are so critical in how we form who we are. You were brought up in Britain. It's a totally different lifestyle, set of mores. Everything is different. And I can see that from the other kids' perspective. You became a curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah, we as children, it's really unfortunate, but children can be horrifically cruel. And it's only they don't have filters. Children say what they feel and they just go with what is and what they hear. And it's unfortunate, but whatever the adults were saying, the children were taking in. And that was all getting dumped on you.
Yes. Yes. I mean, for years I was called the child of a white man, a child of white parents. There was a phrase for it. I didn't mind that at all. It's just that they meant it as an insult, and
Yes.
and that's what hurt. And every time they said it, I would remember my separation from my
Oh,
parents, and I
yeah.
wanted them so badly. I wanted to find them, but they didn't know where I was, and I had no way out.
No, no.
I was stuck.
Well, yeah, at 6, you're not going to necessarily know the phone numbers or even who you should reach out to.
Exactly.
A 6-year-old doesn't have that capacity. By the time you're 14, was there had to have been some rebellion involved there.
By the time I was 14, I had given up actually on
Oh,
myself. I didn't have the energy for rebellion. I didn't play out. I didn't play up. I didn't play out. I actually think I compromised on some of my values. I became a very needy child. When I was in Maidstone, I was very, very confident and bubbly and made friends easily. And I was doing well at school. By the time I was 14 years old in Nigeria, I so desperately needed friends that I would let other people, because I was bright, I would let other people copy my work in an exam so that they would like me. And if we got caught and they blamed me, I would take the blame. I
Oh,
wouldn't even speak up for myself and say, it wasn't my fault. I'm doing my work. She's the one. I wouldn't. And I remember one occasion, Elaine, and I've told this story numerous times because it's important that the young people that I work with, because most of the young people I work with assume I was born confident. I have always been confident, and I do not know what they're going through. And I feel sharing my story gives them an insight into the fact that I've had to overcome stuff. I've had to unlearn and relearn certain things, and that I've had to do some difficult things to get to where I am. And so when I'm asking them to do something that's slightly uncomfortable, there's a reason for it. So I tell them a story of an occasion where I had been invited to a party, a birthday party. Now, when I was a teen, I was never invited to parties because I wasn't cool enough. That's how bad it was. I knew that I was worth to set in my head. I knew that I was worthless to those around me, to my fellow, yeah, and and so it didn't surprise me that nobody wanted me at their party. So it was fine. But I had a friend, a really, really good friend that I'd made when I was about 8 years old, and she was also from England, and so we sort of connected. And as we grew up, she became very popular. She was attractive. She was slim. She was everything that I was not. But I loved her and she loved me. And she was sort of like my bodyguard.
yeah.
She integrated me a bit into the social setting. So people would accept me simply because I knew her. So she was celebrating her 15th birthday. She was 2 months older than me. So I was 14 at this time. And she invited me to come to her party. And I was so excited to go because I thought, somebody's inviting me to their party. And she's cool. I was so excited. So off I went to this party. I remember the dress I was wearing. My mother bought it for me. That was mistake number one. So my
Oh,
mother had bought this. She had bought this dress for me. Yeah, so she was dressing an 8-year-old. I'm 14. So off I go to this party in this dress. And as I walk up the path to the door, there are two boys standing at the door. And so I don't think anything of it. And as I attempt to go into the doors, they just stop me, said, "Excuse me, what do you want?" Very aggressive tone. Now, at this point, Elaine, I just knew something bad was about to happen because I was used to being treated badly. So I could feel the signs, and my heart started to race and my stomach was churning. But I knew that I was meant to be there. So I said to them, "Well, I'm here for my friend's party." And the boys, they looked at each other and they looked at me and looked me up and down, really analyzing, assessing me while I stood there. And then they said, "Are you sure?"
oh,
And I remember thinking, that's a very loaded question. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. Do they mean, am I sure I was invited? Am I sure I'm good enough? I just couldn't think. And people were watching and people were giggling and I was under so much pressure and I didn't know what to do. So I did the one thing that I now teach young people not to do, because our tone is everything, our sound. And people respect you on how you sound. So I went for the begging sound, the begging tone. Mistake number two. So I said, "Could you please just go and get my friend? And she will tell you that she invited me." So I stood there waiting. But in my head, I'm thinking, my friend is going to come to the door and she will vindicate me
yeah.
and she will tell them off. And so I was ready and waiting. And then they came back empty handed and said, "Sorry." They folded their arms across their chests like that and said, "Sorry," looking me straight into the eyeball. "We can't find her." And they stood there. People are watching. I'm there and I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. Now, this was back in the 80s. We didn't have mobile phones. I couldn't give her a ring. So I did the only thing that I knew how, or the only option I thought I took, which was to turn around and leave.
Mm.
It took me 2 hours that day and 3 buses to get home. I cried all the way home. By the time I got home, I concluded, Elaine, that Ore, you are the most useless, worthless human being that Ore, knows. So at 14, that's where I was.
That hurts my heart.
It's hard for me to remember. I've told this story a number of times. A couple of times I've actually burst into tears, which is not very professional, but it
But you're
happened.
human.
It happened. And I felt, I say to the young people now that if only on that day I had been equipped with tools, I would have said to them that, excuse me, I wouldn't have been aggressive,
No.
but I would have changed my tone, made eye contact, and I would have said, excuse me, I insist that you go and get my friend. And if she comes to the door and tells me that I'm not welcome, then I'll leave. That's what I should have done.
Yeah.
But I didn't know
You were
how.
14.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate too, but children also have that pack mentality. And packs, as in, even antelopes, lions, dogs, cats, they can sense weakness. And when you present weakly, you have to be culled from the herd. And that's truly, they were doing what was expected of them, which is a horrible thing to say because I'd like to box their ears, but it is unfortunate, but it is the way that it is. And it's wonderful that you're working with young people. I want to do some more of your story, but then I want us to really get into what it is you do, because I believe it's critical what you're doing, because young people today, for one thing, they are so much more globally aware. I think they have the opportunity to really make a difference in our universe for everybody. And you're arming them, as you said, with the tools to make that possible. Because in an ideal world for me, it's no child would be made to cry by another.
Yeah.
Because each and every one of us is just as valuable as the next.
I agree. When I think about young people, I find it hard not to get emotional because I look back at what I've been through. I've got 2 daughters, and people just assume that because I'm the way that I am, that they're just naturally confident. No, they're work in progress as well. And most of the time, your children don't listen to you; they listen to somebody else.
Oh yeah.
So it's like I need to employ somebody else who does what I do to work with my kids.
That's so true.
But the beauty is they see me work. They know what I do. They respect what I do and value it. And so I'm hoping that they're watching and learning at the same time. But I've been working with young people now for over 15 years. And to date, I've trained over 50,000 young people. And that was when I counted in 2019. I haven't even counted since then. And when I think about a young person, it is a time in their lives where they have a right to experience joy. They're not yet tied down by responsibilities.
Yes.
They are still evolving as a human being.
Yeah.
And they do not need extra baggages or burdens. They need to be shut down. And I think about my life, and I was very fortunate that I was able to turn it around. I came that close to being lost. And I know that there's so many lost young people out there. I meet some of them when I go out and train. And for me, my vision for them and my passion lies in every young person knowing that they are worth a lot and that there's someone in this world who's prepared to die for them.
Yes.
Be that their mother, that there is someone out there who's prepared, that they're valued that much. And then I just equip them with the tools for them to go and take charge of their own destinies. So I equip them with public speaking skills. I equip them with confidence skills. Then I equip them with being able to manage their own mental health, mainly through talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting rid of the stigma, being free and say, do you know what? I'm suffering from anxiety. Duh, I've said it now.
Yeah.
I want them to be free.
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And talking about it and dispensing with any shame, any stigma for anything has to be put in the past with the rest of all the things we needed to change.
Exactly.
As we, Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. Well, we all are learning to know better, and we all need to work on doing better and
Yes.
equipping our children to be able to enjoy that happiness, that joy, because at that time, you're so right, there are no big responsibilities yet. But I truly believe we need to teach this in school as well, because it's the things that they learn. There's no learning about themselves, about how to handle yourself, the tools that you offer. I think we should be giving our children from the get-go.
Yes, I
Even
agree.
primary school or elementary school, whatever, whether you're in North America or Britain or Europe or Africa or wherever you are. I think we have to equip them on the inside first. And then you can worry about the math and the science and the what have you, because if you don't have that core strength of confidence and knowing you're a valuable person, then the rest of it just doesn't really get in.
Exactly. You're so right. I mean, I work with children as young as 8 years old, and I've been working with a primary school for a number of years now, and they love it when I come in and do public speaking with them. And I've had so much feedback from teachers and from parents that when their child then goes on to secondary school, that the school tends to pick them to speak on the opening evening when they invite parents in, new parents in. And they said, and I've had that a lot. And I'm thinking, yes, they're using the tools, they're using the skills. Excellent, because that's what we want to see happen. We want to see them thrive.
Absolutely. I think that's critically important. And well, I don't want us to go too far without leaving a little bit of the stepping stones of how you got to where you are today. We left you at 14 being heartbroken. Take us forward so that we end on a much higher note.
So one day my mother said something to me. During the course of my being in Nigeria, my father, my biological father, died. So I was 11 when this happened. And my mother was 31, so she was very young. And we went through a very, very tough time. We were poor. When I say poor, we imagine a child from England living in some of those conditions that we sometimes see on TV, where people are asking for some aid. So we were struggling. So my mother decided that we're going to go back to England because I'm English, and so I might as well go back to the place of my birth and go back and regain my life. The day she said that I was moving back to England, it was like music to my ears. I thought, I'm going back to the place of my birth where people value me. I was so thrilled. So I returned to England when I was 18 years old. So I had been in Africa for 11 years without ever leaving the country.
Wow.
So I returned to England, and this time we were in London. And what surprised me, Elaine, was that the treatment I was getting in Nigeria continued when I returned to London, which was a shock to me. I just thought I was going to come back to London. Things were going to revert back to the way they were when I was in Maidstone, Kent, and I was going to have my good life back again. But that did not happen. I continued to be a source of verbal abuse and put downs. And by the time I was 19 years old, I thought to myself, I do not know what the problem is, but clearly there's a problem somewhere. And the only thing that I can point at that is in common with being in Nigeria and now being back in England is me.
It's you.
So clearly I'm the problem. Not that I am a problem, there is something. Yeah. So what was I going to do with that information? initially I didn't know because there was no mental health support, there was no counseling. I didn't have any access to any courses or any self-help books. I didn't know what to do. I was also desperate to find my foster parents and didn't know where to look. My mother had told me that they'd moved. I wanted to go to a program called Surprise Surprise that used to be hosted by Cilla Black. And my mother said, "Oh no, you can't, you shouldn't go there. You know, it's not going to make a difference." So I just gave up looking for my foster parents. But I did know that something needed to change. Anyway, eventually, I found my foster parents when I was 20 years old, which was one of the best days of my life. And that only happened by accident. And when I found my foster parents and they told me their side of the story, and I had heard my birth mother's side of the story, I realized that it was a situation of two sets of parents wanting one child.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was loved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the moment that dawned on me, I realized that I was not worthless. And I realized that I was worth fighting for. And I had to do things. So a lot of the training I do, apart from the presenting, but especially the confidence building, has come from my life of steps that I needed to take. Because I realized that I was not an ugly duckling. Never had been. I was a swan. And I needed to start learning how to be like one. And so I started to do activities that would enhance my skill set. I learned how to swim. I learned how to drive. I started to skill myself up. I realized that I needed to do something that would take me out of my comfort zone. And so I decided to become a missionary. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we're a missionary-based church. And so I decided that I wanted to be a missionary and go out there and do something scary, but also help other people. And so I did that, and that really boosted my sense of self-worth and my confidence. And then I came back and joined a speakers club. So I was constantly putting myself in situations that were challenging as far as comfort zones were concerned, but each one of them was not only building my skill set, it was enhancing what I thought about myself. And it's interesting because when I met my husband, I was the one who made the first move. And that's a big thing. That was a big thing coming from somebody. Yes, I did. I thought, you know what, that's marriage material there. I'm just going to go for it. And so I did.
Yes. So I just want to sum up for the audience. Something you said there is so critically important. You said, when I realized that the two sets of parents just loved me, that was that moment. You had that inner nugget that even though you couldn't access it for those 11 years, that inner nugget of all that love from those two sets of parents is really what gave you the impetus to go after the confidence and the skill sets. And I think that's good for kids to understand, because you said everybody has someone who's willing to die for them. So we all have that inner nugget. We just have to learn to access it.
Yeah. It's very important to me. I am very professional in what I do, but when I work with young people, because somebody was speaking to me today about speaking engagements, and I love doing speaking engagements, but I really do love training, because training gives them access to me, proper access, and I get to know who it is I'm speaking to. But when I go into a room with a young person, I love them. They know they can feel it. I love them, and I tell them what they're worth. I tell them my story, and I tell them what I want for them. And so at least you know that there's somebody in this world, even though I don't know you, but by the end of a session, you're going to love me. That much I know. So you will believe that I love you at the end of it, because just knowing that somebody thinks you're worthwhile is enough of a flicker to create light.
So well said. So well said. Well, I think you are an incredible gift to so many young people. And I love the fact that you're doing this work because it is critically important. It's cliched and what have you, but they are the future. They are our future. And it is, I think, more important than ever that now we know that we can equip our children for their mental health, for their inner wisdom, for their self-confidence, for all of these pieces. Then it truly behooves us to do that for every single child.
I agree. It's interesting that you use the word gift because my name, Ore, means gift. The full name is Ore Oluwa, which means gift of God. So it's interesting that you should use that word.
Yeah. Well, you are, and that's what came to me was you truly are a gift, and I have to say thank you to Elaine Powell, who told me I needed to meet you, and she was absolutely right. I am absolutely thrilled to have met you. I'm going to ask you a couple of things. I don't want to take your whole day. I could probably talk to you for a few hours because I think you have so much to impart. We're going to make sure that people can go access your website, and you'll be able to find out about Ore's book, which will be available on May the 3rd. So what's on the horizon for you? And the other thing I will ask you that I ask all my guests on the show is, what's one little tidbit or tweak or tip you can offer our audience that they can implement in their own lives, be it personal or business, that you use every day?
Okay, so what's next for me is promoting my book because that's coming out on the 3rd of May. And that's important simply because there will be some young people that I cannot physically reach. But my book can. And my book, talks about my life as a youngster and also talks briefly about some of the tools that I have used and it breaks it down in a way that is easy for any young person or anyone to get value from. And so that's what's next for me to get that sorted. As far as what tip can I give to our viewers, it is something that I live by and that I've learned that life is not just for surviving. Life is for thriving. Yes. We need to live it.
Oh, absolutely. So well said. I look forward to reading the book. I look forward to sharing the book with others. And I look forward to perhaps getting you back on the show at some point so we can continue our talk and learn more about where you go and all the young people that you touch. I'm Elaine Lindsay. This has been BBP TV once again with my incredible guest, Ore. I'm going to mess up your last name. Ogungbayi.
Well done.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well done. I caused myself problems there because I took off your name so I couldn't see it. I just had to memorize it.
You did well.
Thank you. Thank you. Having said that, you'll be able to contact Ore with the page. You'll see all her social links. You'll see the link to go get her book. And also you can see on the screen, we have a link to her website. That's it for us today. I'm Elaine Lindsay. And as I always say, go ahead and make the very best of your today every day. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Brought to you by BBP TV Show and True Social, helping small biz navigate the digital world.